Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. If this is the first time you've stopped by, I am so happy to have you here. I wanted to just pop in and talk to you about a couple of things that I wanted to just update you on. Now, myself, I love to embroidery, to sew, to serge, do all kinds of creative things. So you're going to see those types of things here on my channel. But one of the things that I do lots is serging. And maybe you've never heard about Serge Fun Club. I actually have a club that you can join, and I'll place that link down in the description if you want to click on that link and go check it out. Every month we do a project. This is June 2024's project, and I incorporate serging features. You also have an embroidery design that is incorporated within each month. So if you like to embroidery as well, that's a little extra added bonus. But if you're someone that has a serger and you're really not comfortable with serging, this might be a fun place for you to join, where I can help you get comfortable with serging and teach you all types of things. Now today, I'm very excited to share with you a tutorial. Recently, I went live within my Facebook group and we created a little cup cozy. And I promised you that I would have a tutorial prepared for you to walk through the process of how I designed the cup cozy within the features within my embroidery sewing machine combination. And my machine is the Baby Lock Solaris. It also has a section within it that is called the IQ Designer area. And this is where we design our cup cozy. And if you don't have that machine, maybe you have a machine that has features that are similar to it within it, then you might be interested as well. Not only are we going to design the file that I will use to make our cup cozies, I'll also walk you through creating the cup cozies here in this tutorial. Once again, I'm so glad that you stopped by. Hey, if you haven't already, subscribe, join my Facebook group. That's where if you create anything that maybe you've watched me create here or learn from me on my YouTube channel, or if you're in Serge Fun Club and you are creating some of those projects, each month along with me, you can post your pictures in our Facebook group. We've got a nice little community there and we really would love for you to join. I am so excited that you're here with me today. Now let me share this tutorial with you and we'll have a little extra learning and creative fun. Here are the cup cozies that we will create together. I've wanted to make these for quite a long time and I wanted to design them within the IQ Designer section of my Baby Lock Solaris. Now if you'll notice, I have a few different types of cups here. These are going to fit on even other cups that you may have. So maybe if you go through the drive-through and you have a little one, you pick up a little children's meal, these are going to fit really nicely on those little cups as well. And it's going to help it not be so cold to their little hands when they're holding them, and it'll also help absorb the moisture from the ice and the cold of the cup as well. Now, I just thought these were so easy to make. I've been wanting to make them for a while, and they're very, very useful. So as you can see, this cup from a fast food restaurant is a little larger at the top, but it slides up really easily, and it's going to help as well with the cold of the cup sweating. It's really useful. You can create these in different printed fabrics, solid fabrics, and that's what we're going to do today. We're going to create them out of some cotton fabric that is printed. We're going to just get started designing our cup cozy within the machine, and then we'll also stitch it out. Very fast and very easy to create these. Once you have your file that you create within your IQ Designer section of the machine, you're going to make these over and over again, and you're really going to enjoy using them. You might even think about creating them in a party theme for a birthday party, if you're going to use like these type of solo cups or party cups, and you're going to theme a birthday party to a certain type of item, maybe a little butterfly, maybe a unicorn, who knows, maybe some superhero characters. My little grandsons are going to enjoy that for sure. They love their superheroes, you can make these in those types of fabrics that you pick up at your fabric store also. Now it also fits on this one as well. Just wanted to show you that. So this one's a little narrower. So what happens is I just slide it up further up on the cup and it's gonna fit that really well. Now let me show you how we are going to create these within our machine itself, get the file design first, and my approach of how I went about making these little guys, creating these and designing these from start to finish. Now, even though you can use other fabrics that you have, I really recommend you using 100% cotton fabric with 100% cotton batting. That's just going to help with the absorbing of any of the sweating from the cups when you have ice in it, along with the liquid that you have in your cup. Just an extra little tip. Now the first thing that we will do is actually make a drawn template. I've just picked up a coffee sleeve from my local coffee store and I've opened it up to use it as a pattern, okay? So if you've gone to your local coffee shop and they have these little sleeves that go around your coffee cup, the cups that you buy your tea or your coffee in, or your hot chocolate, you can use that as a pattern. So this one is actually still together. This one, I've opened it up and I'll set that one that's not opened aside. So when you open it up, you'll have this shape. So then we'll also need I like using a Sharpie marker that is a medium tipped Sharpie marker. This one here is a fine. The mediums, I typically pick those up from my office supply store. Those are not usually found in stores as easily as the fine tip, but we're going to use the fine tip today. So we'll just open it up. And if you'll notice, I have a few pages of copy paper. If I'm drawing on my paper, I want to make sure I have a few pieces underneath it so it doesn't bleed through the paper or onto the mat since we're working on my mat. And for ease, real quick, I'm just going to place a little bit of tape underneath this as well, and that'll hold it down onto the paper itself. I'm going to use some washi tape. Washi tape is something that a lot of people that do scrapbooking use. It's not as tacky, so once I tape it down, I'll be able to remove it pretty easily from the paper that I'm placing it on top of. Again, I just don't want it to slip. So I'm going to draw this so that it's upright. It's going to be a little easier for me. And we just want to go around. And I'll follow the shape here on the ends, even though in a little bit you'll see that I'll make that a little straighter. And I just want to make sure that I'm getting enough of the ink onto the paper. And that's why I really prefer using a medium tip. The medium tip is a little bit more generous when drawing with it. So we'll just continue outlining the shape. Now once I've completed that, I'll just remove this from the paper. And then I'm through with this little template. And you'll notice it's not exactly straight, but that's okay. It's going to serve the purpose. But what I do want to change is I want to make sure that I draw this line straight across. I don't feel like I need this little change in pattern there for the template. So we're going to just draw this straight across. This is really forgiving. You don't have to be overly perfectionistic with it. It's going to work out just fine. So I've extended that line, and then I'm going to extend the line from here to here. So very easy. And we'll do that as well on the opposite side. Okay, so that's going to be my drawn image that we will scan on our machine. Now that we've completed that, I'll grab my paper scanning frame and just show that to you. So we're good here. We only need this one now. And set the rest of my paper aside. Now here's my scanning frame that comes with our Baby Lock Solaris. I'll just remove the magnets. Now whenever you're scanning and using your scanning frame, you never want to put any paper or anything on top of this. I've placed my paper onto the center of my scanning frame as best I can, and I've placed the magnets on. Now we'll slide it onto our embroidery arm and latch it. I also removed the thread from my needle just so the camera doesn't accidentally pick up any thread that I have in my needle. If I had a darker thread in it, that's just an extra little tip. I'll be using my Baby Lock Solaris. We'll select IQ Designer. We'll select our scanning key, and then we'll select Image Scan. This is my process, and this is the approach that I wanted to take in designing this project today. We'll select Scan and OK, and our machine will begin scanning our drawing that we created together. Now, as we're going through this process, before we get started, I just want to mention that I do have prior videos here on my YouTube channel where I go a little more in depth about the keys and the process of using IQ Designer. So if you haven't watched those, you'll definitely want to go check those out. So if you'll notice on the screen, we're seeing our workspace, what happens after we've scanned. And here in this area, the opacity, I can bring it up so that it's a little bit darker so you can see it a little better. Now I don't want to bring it all the way up and leave it there, so I'm just making it a little darker so you can see it for now. Again, this is just an image scan. We don't have any line properties on the screen itself. It's just a background image that you and I are going to use to create our project. I'll bring the opacity down a little more, and we're going to zoom in closer so we can see that background image more clearly and work on it together up close. So there's 200%, and that works for me. But we can even go up closer, 400%, and that might give you a better option. A couple of ways that I can move around. I can select my panning feature and move it around in this way, which is pretty easy, or we can use our sliders. A couple of things that happens. If we're using our panning feature, we'll need to go back and reselect any tools over here that we're using throughout the process every time we pan over in one position. Now, if we just want to use our sliders, it will remember whatever tool that we're working with over here, and we won't have to reselect it. You'll see that happen as I go. So let's go first into our line property section. We want to apply a straight stitch, and I'll select a red. So I'm just going to select a different color, and I want to use my point-to-point tool. We'll select OK. And now that we've made those decisions, you'll notice that the point-to-point tool is selected. It's blue. Whatever is shaded in blue is selected, and we can start our process. Now, before we start designing, let me just give you a little bit of an overview of what I'm thinking and how I approached this project. I want to make this in a way that it's kind of like an applique, but it's really not an applique. It's just an in the hoop construction process. So the first stitch that I want to lay down is my placement stitch. Once we hoop some material, we'll stitch out our placement stitch onto the material, and that will be our guideline for laying down our batting and our cotton fabric that will be the outside of our project. Once I've laid those two things down, those two items, the batting and the fabric, I'll need to tack those two layers down. So we need a placement stitch and then a tack down stitch. Next, I want to add some designer fills or maybe my stipple fill that's built into my machine. So now we're stitching three different things: our placement stitch, our tack down stitch, and our fill stitch, our quilting stitch. Next, we'll place another piece of fabric right sides down, and then we will have a construction stitch. And we'll do all of that together later on in the tutorial, but I just want you to kind of hear my process before we get started. Whenever I stitch a placement stitch and a tack down stitch, I like to make those stitches, those lines, a little bit larger than my construction stitch. And that way, once it's constructed, we won't see our placement or our tack down stitch on those outer edges of our project when we turn it right side out. Now, maybe you think that's a little too much information, but I'd just like to give you a bit of a foundation. The first thing that we're going to design is our placement stitch. I want that placement stitch to be larger than the image that we scanned, so we won't see that stitch once we construct. So let's create our placement stitch. I will use, like I said, my point-to-point tool. I don't want to apply it right on top of the line. I want it to be a little bit further out. So I will come out here a little bit further. I'll click. Now if I left click and hold, it really just stretches out that line as well. I don't want it to be too much bigger than my template. And to me right now, looking here in this area, I can tell that I've gone out a little bit too far. So I'm going to stop and undo once again. I'm even going to move this over a little bit so I can see this corner a little better. Grab my point-to-point tool once more. Notice how when I chose my panning feature, it deselected my point-to-point tool. So I'm selecting it once again. Okay, so I'm going to go a little bit closer in here. And the reason why I'm doing this is I don't really want to make this a whole lot larger. That way it gives you the option to use a smaller hoop. So now that I have started, I feel like I've got that a good little amount away from the line, and I'm stretching it out, and then I'll release. So I'm a little bit further out here. I think that looks good. I'm not right on top of it. That makes me happy. Let's select our panning tool, and I'll just move it over. I'll reselect my point-to-point tool, and now I'm going to, in little bitty bites, or smaller bites, not little bitty, I'll left click and then bring that a little closer to the line. Because this is a curved edge, a gentle curve, I don't want to point and bring a big straight line because look, it's not going to curve. So to get some curving going on, some illusional curves, I will click in small amounts and release. Now we'll do this all the way down. Let's do that all the way down this edge of the shape. Now you'll also notice that I left click and I drag. This is a habit of mine. I don't try to just position the cursor and place one little point on there. I really like to click and drag. That way I have a better visual of where I'm placing that point. And it actually happens a lot faster if I do it like this, instead of just trying to place the cursor right here and pop a point. So I like to click and drag. Let's move it up. Reselect our point-to-point. And once I get to the points where I feel like I'm not seeing enough, again, I just pan and reselect, pan and move, and then reselect my tool and continue the process. If you don't like where you've placed your point, you can always undo. And that's a benefit of us doing little bites. We can always just undo the last step. But if we did a real long line, it's going to take away that complete long line, that last step that was actually applied. Let's use our slider this time. So now I'll just place my cursor over here on my slider, click it, and then drag it down. Now you'll notice that it did not deselect my point-to-point, so I don't have to reselect it. So those are the difference in your panning feature and your sliders. All right, so now I'm close to this bottom little corner, and that's going to be a straight corner, so I can just stretch a little further down and release. Now let's move it over. And I want to go right past this area, so let's left click. This is a nice straight line, so I don't have to select in smaller increments. There we go. Let's continue up the opposite side, repeating that same process that we just did earlier along the opposite side. I'm just undoing it. Wanted to adjust that position. I didn't like where I had placed it. And you'll notice as we're going up, we see this red line stretched. It's just giving us a visual of where it's going to connect. If we were to stop right now and just click close to the starting point, it'll automatically close it once we get close to the starting point and pop a point. Notice when I place my cursor down, I left click, it's allowing me to move that. So don't let that confuse you. So click and drag, click and drag and position it. Oh, I think I'm a little too close in there, so I can go back. It's just an experimenting process, a little meticulous, but I love to do things like this, and maybe you do too. I love that I have these features built in the machine. All right, so that will have closed up my image. Let's zoom out. I've got it to about 200%. If I go to 100%, you'll get to see the whole thing there. Okay, so that's really good. We've established our placement stitch size. So right now what I want to do is I want to place this in the memory of IQ Designer. Next, I want to create my fill image. So we can use this image that we've already traced and applied those outlines to. It's the shape that we need to place our fill stitches within. So now let's just go over to our decorative fills. You can choose a stipple or any of your decorative stitches that are within your machine. I'm just going to keep it simple and quick, so we're going to use our stipple stitch. I'm going to make the stipple stitch green, and then I will take and apply this within the shape. Now before I do this, because we've already applied that outline stitch, I really don't want this to stitch. So let's go back in here and select no stitch, and okay, highlight it, and we applied it. So now that we've applied a no stitch line, that simply means that once it stitches my stipple stitch after I've applied it, it will not stitch another straight stitch around that area. We're stitching a placement, a tack down, and a construction stitch, so we really don't need an extra outline around our fill stitch. So let's select once again, excuse me, we've already selected, we already applied it. Let's just make sure we've applied our fill cup and then place that design inside this area. Now I want to place this in memory as well. So we now have our fill that we've created in IQ Designer memory. We now have our outline for our placement and our tack down stitch placed in the memory of IQ Designer. Now the next thing I want to create is my construction stitch. And remember, I want the construction stitch to be designed right on top of the line that we scan. So now at this point, I want to clear the screen. So let's select all clear. And now that I've all cleared, I'll just rescan my scanning frame to get my image. So let's go up in here once again. We'll just rescan, image scan. Okay, now that I've rescanned, now keep in mind, I didn't move my paper on my frame at all. We want to make sure that stayed consistently in the same position. That way, when we bring this line image that we create together with our previous line images, they're still right on top of each other. So keep that in mind. There are multiple ways to do things in IQ Designer, and today this is how I'm doing it, and this is how I'm showing you my process. So once again, now we'll just go in and place an outline. We'll just make it purple this time, a straight stitch that we've selected, and we'll trace right on top of these lines. Let's zoom up. I'm going to kind of fast forward this process since I've already showed you previously how to use the point-to-point tool, move around, and make those things happen. And this time, we're just going to place it right on top of the line. Now, the one thing that's going to be a little bit different is we need an opening to turn it right side out. And in order to do that, once we've traced the whole thing, then we'll use our eraser to erase an area for our turning area. So let's just go ahead and trace it all once again right on top of the lines. Now it might be a little hard for you to see since I applied a purple to it. Let's go back and make it a pink. That way you'll see it a little better. See how it's pink? So you have those color choices, whatever you would like, whatever makes more sense to you. Undo, gotta love the undo. Now we've completed our last stitch, the construction stitch. I'm going to dim out and bring the opacity down so you only see the line that we just created. Now we need to make an opening for our flipping. Oh, now look what I did. Okay, this is good for this to happen. See how we started in purple and then I switched over to fuchsia? Let's go make sure those are all the same color. And let's just make it green. We'll select OK. We'll apply green, fill cup. Green to the purple and green to the fuchsia. Okay, so they're all one color. I changed my mind in the middle, but I needed to finish up and reapply the same color to this area as well. Now we can take and grab our eraser. We need to erase an area in here that will allow it to stop stitching. So let's zoom in a little bit, and that will accommodate our... Let's make it a little bit bigger. There we go. That'll accommodate our turning it right side out. And I'm just guesstimating here. You just got to make sure that you're getting rid of any of those little lines in between, or you'll have a little stitch that will appear in that area. Okay. I'm going to undo because I really want that a little more in the center. So let's do it one more time since I was zooming in so you could see it. I didn't get the full visual concept. Okay, I think that's good. So we have some sections here that are going to stitch and here. Oops, don't do that. I did my eraser. Now I did undo, and so there we go. We've got our opening, so let's select next. And we're going to change our stitch length. I want to see that in millimeters. It makes more sense to me in that way. It's at 2.0. We're going to bring it up to 2.2. And the great thing about IQ Designer is when it does the straight stitches, it's going to stitch around twice. So whenever it's stitching that construction stitch, I like that it's going to stitch around once and also repeat that. So that's going to give it some extra stability. We'll select OK. And I'm just going to place it in memory. Now placing it in memory over here a little further into the process, it's going to place this construction stitch in the memory of IQ Designer as well as the in memory on the embroidery side of the machine. I didn't really need it on the embroidery side of the machine, but I went ahead and adjusted the stitch length over on this screen. You've got choices. All right, so now that that's in order, I'm going to touch home. That'll bring me back to my home screen. And now that we've designed all of our pieces, we're back into IQ Designer. I want to pull these out of memory. We'll select out of memory from IQ over here, our files. So we'll select our placement stitch. And we'll select OK. Next. And here, I want to make this a little bit longer, so we can make some changes here if we want to. So that's going to be 2.3. We'll select OK. And we'll set it and OK once again. And now it's over on the embroidery side of the machine. So we've just placed our placement stitch down. It is this color. So let's add. Now we're going to go select what we created earlier and make it a tack down stitch. So we're back in the memory pocket of IQ Designer. We're going to select the same one so they're the same size. We'll select OK. And now we'll do next once again. I want to change that stitch length. This one I'm going to bring up to 2.4. I'll select OK. And we'll need to change the color as well. So we'll make it a gold. That way, as we go over to the embroidery side of the machine, we have 2 stitch outs where it's going to stop. So there's our gold. So we have our placement stitch and our tack down stitch. Let's go back to IQ Designer by selecting Add, IQ Designer. We'll go into our IQ Designer memory pockets. And we'll grab our fill stippling stitch that we created. Now we can look at our stippling. 5 is a little bit too close for me, so we're going to change that now. Let's bring it up to about 10. And we'll see what it looks like. We'll select OK. You're going to notice that this is going to get bigger. Okay, I like that. That looks pretty good. We'll set it. And now we have our fill stitch. Let's add. Go back into IQ Designer. In the memory of IQ Designer. And we need our construction stitch. We'll select our construction stitch, select OK, and next, we changed our stitch length. That looks good. Now my stippling was this green color. I'm going to change this to purple. And set it, and OK. And now we have our placement, our tack down, our fill stitch, our stipple stitch, and our construction stitch. We've actually created our whole design. We can select embroidery, and then we can place it in the memory of our embroidery machine. And that way, if we want to stitch this multiple times, we just have to go over to the embroidery side of the machine now and bring it in from the embroidery side of the machine. We don't have to design it again. It's already designed. Now the exciting part starts for sure is stitching it out so that we can have our own little cup cozies. What we'll do is stitch 1 layer of 100% cotton fabric in the frame that you've selected to stitch yours in. We're only using fabric to hoop. There's no need for us to use stabilizer throughout this process. We just want this cup cozy to have fabric on the front, the back, and batting in the middle, and I've chosen to use 100% cotton fabrics and batting as well. I've chosen a fabric here. I'll coordinate my threads with the fabric that I've chosen. We're going to be stitching 3 of them in the hoop. You could stitch different fabrics in one hooping, whatever you would like. Let's head over to our embroidery machines and get started. Let's place our hoop onto our machine. Now I have threaded my machine with a coordinating embroidery thread that complements the fabric that I'll be using. You're always going to want to make sure if your fabric on this side or this side is a little bit longer that it doesn't flip over into your embroidery field. So just keep that in mind. Now that we've placed the hoop onto our machine, let's start fresh and bring our design into our machine. We'll select embroidery, our memory pocket. We'll select our design that we created together and set it onto our workspace. And if you would like, you can embroider this one completely from start to finish. I'm going to add 2 more, and in doing that, let me show you how I'll do that. Well, first, select all, because there's multiple pieces to this design. So let's select it all and scoot it all the way over to the right. We'll select OK. Now let's add. Go back into our memory pocket. We'll select the design again and set it. Now here's where we're going to want to do something a little bit different. We only want to grab all of these pieces that are together, and there are 4 pieces: our placement, our tack down, our stipple, and our construction stitch. So whenever we select, we need to just go through this one and make sure that we select all 4 pieces. So if you look here, I have a red rectangle around the outer edges of it. So we'll set that. We'll need to select over here to the right, our little select key. And you'll notice what happens is it went over to this one. So I just want you to see that you don't want that to happen. So let's go back. So we're still on this one, so let's go to the left. And you might have to check like that and make sure you have the correct one selected. So here's my little red bounding box. We'll set that one. We need to go to the left one more time. Notice that that one highlighted. We'll set it, and we'll go to the left one more time, and we'll set it. And you'll notice that the shading of the rose color got darker each time. Now that we've got all of those selected, let's scoot all of these over to the left. And see how all those parts and pieces go over together. And I've just chosen to move the first one that I brought in over to the right, move the second one that I brought in over to the left, and now we'll bring one more in and it'll sit right there in the center. So we'll add, go back to our memory pocket, we'll select the design once again and set it. And now we're good to go. So we've got 3 of those designs on the workspace. We'll select embroidery and we'll start embroidering. Now, like I mentioned, I want to stitch all 3 of these in one hooping. It's just going to go faster. I don't have to hoop fabric more than once, and it'll make good use out of my fabric that I've already hooped in my frame. It'll be necessary for me to skip forward and backwards just to make it go a little bit faster. If you want to stitch one in its entirety in this hoop, you absolutely can, but I'm going to go about this a little bit differently. I'll be using the same fabric for all 3. So the first thing that's going to stitch is my placement stitch. So let's stitch our first placement stitch. Now at this point, I'm going to stop. When we create an IQ Designer, that straight stitch will track itself around twice. That's just the nature of the process. We'll cut our threads. It's not necessary for me to go around twice when I'm stitching my placement stitch. So now we'll go forward in our design process. Let me show you that on the screen. In order to go forward or backwards in the design, we need to select our key down at the bottom, our needle minus and plus key, and that will help us maneuver moving forward and backwards in the design. So let's select this key. And let me bring your attention to this here up at the top of the screen. So you'll notice when we designed it, we had a color, a fuchsia color, a gold color, a green color, and a purple color. And you'll notice how that repeats. But what I want you to see is we're going to skip forward till we get to the beginning of the next design, which would be the placement stitch here, the red. So if you look at the screen here, we'll be able to move that around. And now we need to go forward here until we see the little dot get right over there to the red, and you'll notice that this will be red as well. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So now we're at the placement stitch of the second one that we adjusted over here on our workspace. Let's stitch our placement stitch for this one. I'll stop it. Again, I don't need it to stitch all the way around twice. I'll cut my threads. And then we're going to go forward in the design to the next one until we find the placement stitch. We already have our screen up where we are jumping forward. So we'll go forward. And now we have the red color of thread. Can check it up here as well, and this is our placement stitch for the third one that we brought into our machine. Now I'll leave this on the screen where we go forward and backwards until we get finished. We'll be using these features multiple times until we finish. Time to stop. Cut the threads. Now the whole purpose for stitching a placement stitch is really to help us make sure that we're placing enough fabric down that's going to cover those areas. So as we go through the process, our project will have enough fabric to be completed. Now what I did was I cut 2 pieces of my cotton fabric, the same size, and that size needs to cover all of these areas. But first, I cut a layer of batting, so we'll take that layer of batting and we'll place it on top of our designs that we've just stitched. So all of our placement stitches should be completely covered. And you can just use your frame. You can take it off your machine. You can align your batting and cut it to the size that's appropriate for your placement in the hoop that you're using. So now I can see that my batting is generously covering above, below, and on the sides. And now I need to take one layer, only one right now, of my printed fabric. Here it is, right sides facing up. This little fabric is like a cup that has left a water mark from the bottom. I think that's interesting. All right, so now I've generously cut my square of fabric so that it covers the placement stitches, the batting. And now that we've done that, we can step through the process and stitch our tack down stitch for this one and our fill stitch. Then we'll jump over to the next one and stitch our tack down stitch and our fill stitch, which is our stipple stitch, and then we'll do the same for the center design. It's okay that we stitch the next 2 steps in the pattern since that'll all be stitched on top. Our construction stitch will be stitched later on after we add our last piece of fabric. Now to quickly get me back to the beginning, we're going to select the 0. That's the very beginning of all of the designs that are on the screen. The first one that comes up is the placement stitch. On the first one, let's go forward. That brings us to our tack down. So let's stitch the tack down and the stipple stitch. Now as we begin stitching, I'm going to really make sure that my fabric doesn't slip around as it starts taming and sewing together the fabric, the batting to the foundation fabric. Once again, I don't need it to stitch all the way around twice, so I've stopped it. I'll cut. And then I'll jump forward one thread color, and that will be a stipple stitch. I'll repeat this process going forward, stitching the placement and the fill stitch for each one of the additional designs. We've completed all of our tack down stitches for each one of the designs and our stipple stitch. Now it's time for us to take our fabric, our last piece of fabric, and place it over the designs, right side facing down. Then we'll step through the design itself until we've stitched the construction stitch for each one of our cup cozies. Now you'll notice we're already on the last cup cozies construction stitch. So instead of me going forward and backwards, I'm just going to go ahead and stitch that one now. As you can see, it tells us that we've finished the embroidery, but we're not finished since we're popping forward and backwards. So we'll select OK. We know that it just finished the construction stitch on our last one. So we'll just go through the process. The purple ones are our construction stitch, and we've already stitched this one. So we'll just go forward until we've stitched this one and this one. As you can see, we've completed all three of our cup cozies. It's time for us to remove our frame from the machine, and we'll trim our cup cozies, turn them right side out, press, close up our openings, and also sew them into a circle so they'll fit our cups. Now, if you think you're going to stitch these over and over again, now's a good time for you to take all of these that you've placed together and just place them in the memory of your machine. That way, next time you want to stitch these again, you don't have to reposition them onto the embroidery space. It's all ready to go for you. Now we just simply have to remove it from the frame and then trim it. And we'll just trim about a heavy 1/8 or a scant 1/4 around all edges. I'm going to use my scissors. It's a good thing for you to do when you're sitting and watching a movie, sitting for an appointment somewheres. If you like to always have something to do, most of us that love to sew and do things like this enjoy having some sit-down tasks to do at times. We like to keep our hands moving. Now on the corners, you can just snip off the little points just to reduce a little bit of the bulk. You don't want to get too close to your stitching. We don't want to compromise the stitching in the corners. Now we'll turn them right side out. Just open it up. It's your favorite point turner. And I really like to make sure the corners are nice and precise. Once we're finished pressing, we'll be placing the ends end to end and we'll be zigzagging those together. So I do like making sure that I have crisp corners. Okay, we'll repeat that to our other two as well. Now that we've completed the embroidery process, we need to close up this area of our cup cozies. I've already done this to these two and I've straight stitched those closed. So this is what we will be doing next. We'll just set those aside. So here we have our opening. And I like working on my little wool mat. You could do this on your ironing station as well. We want to turn under that little top stitched edge, tuck it up underneath there, as well as the back lining section. So let's just get started on that. And once I get it turned under at one point, I'll lay it flat and I'll grab some of my heat resistant pins and just give it a little pin there into the mat. This will really help it be a little easier throughout the pressing process. I will press it really well. I'll take some starch, give it a spray, and that'll help create a really pretty pressed memory there. And I also have a clapper. I use my clapper quite a lot where I have layers like this. They're a bit heavier. That'll help set that seam also. You just press it and then place your clapper on top and it'll allow the heat to radiate onto your item and then into the mat. Okay, that looks really nice. I'll look at the back, make sure that I've tamed it just enough there so when we go to our machines, it'll be easy for us to top stitch and we won't struggle with keeping those raw edges under. So at this point, you might find it a little easier as well to keep it turned under and then just slip a pin so it'll help control it. I like to make sure I have a pin at the beginning and the end. That way I'm not guessing where it stops and starts. Your fabric all starts really blending well together. And now we'll just slip over the sewing machine and top stitch from here all the way across to here. And we'll make sure we reverse tack when we start and when we stop. We'll top stitch using coordinating sewing thread with our fabric. And again, we're just using a straight stitch, making sure that we reverse tack in the beginning and in the end and at the end. Our top stitching is complete. Now we'll just trim any of those threads that extend in those areas where we started and stopped. Now our last step you may find a little cumbersome, but once you do it a time or two, it'll be okay. You'll get comfortable with it. We're going to select a zigzag stitch. So here we have our cup cozy. We have the right side, and what I want you to do is just fold it in half so that the ends butt up edge to edge. Now again, it's going to be a little bit odd, but notice that right side of the fabric, the right side, which is our stippling, is on the inside. And again, I'm just turning it so that these edges will lay edge to edge throughout the sewing process. I'm going to align them. Y'all can kind of see that. It's going to be hard for me to let you see it while I'm sewing it, but I'm going to try to get you a good little angle there. Now it is important, if I didn't mention, to make sure that you're using a thread that coordinates. This zigzag stitch where we connect it all together, it will show on the right side of your little cup cozy. So again, I moved you around so you could see a little different angle. We're going to butt these up edge to edge, and then we'll just slip it up underneath our presser foot. And I really just focus on the beginning part first, making it edge to edge. I'll lower my presser foot, position it so that I'm starting on the fabric, take a few stitches. We'll definitely want to reverse tack in the beginning and at the end. So as I zig and zag, it's going to be grabbing both of those edges. And then I just look at this area and manipulate it so that they come together if I need to kind of tweak it ever so slightly. I'm hoping my hands are not in your way. So there we have it. So our little zigzag is complete. You can turn it back right side out. And the wider section is the top of your cup. Again, we'll just trim our little threads there. How fast, easy, and fun is this going to be now that we've had a bit of time designing them within the IQ Designer section of our machine, and really just walking through some really great educational steps on our machine. Let me just take a minute to just trim that thread here and down here at the bottom. There we go. Now I'm just going to place this over one of my little solo cups. I'm going to use my little cup cozies quite a lot. I hope you do too, and I hope you really enjoyed this tutorial.